Hi everyone, and welcome to the ViaMonstra Academy office hours. My name is Johan, and I'll be your host for the next hour. So at the Academy, you can ask questions about anything related to MDT, ConfigMgr, Intune, Azure, PowerShell, imaging, you name it. I'll be happy to answer your questions. So that being said, let's bring it in. All right, so let me see if there are any questions coming in already. Um, let's see here. There is a gentleman here in the Zoom call that had a question about user collections to an AED group, basically direct versus query based. The question is related to ConfigMgr, obviously, and as long as your queries are not too time consuming, either one will do just fine. I usually prefer the simplicity of just adding the group by the name as it is, but it doesn't really matter as long as the query doesn't take too long time to execute. Now to go over to my demo environment real quick. Basically, when you set up queries in or collections in ConfigMgr, all these different resources that you put in here, if you have advanced queries, they can take a really long time to execute. And a good way to keeping track on this is something that Microsoft added in not too long ago into the product, but where you can actually see the collection evaluation times in real time. You can see your full evaluations, you can see your incremental evaluation, and you can see the queue that you currently have. And in general, if you take a look in here and you start to see your run times that are up, not in seconds as these guys are, but up in minutes, or sometimes I've seen up to hours, that's an indication of something not being very well in your environment. So keep an eye on this one and make sure that your queries and collections doesn't have exceedingly wrong or long runtimes. So that's my take on that. Let's see, there was a follow-up comment on that. Doesn't show memberships of the group when doing direct members. Can't say I have tried to add a direct member as a user, but I have set up in this environment here. Currently I have user discovery enabled. Create a user collection demo. I'm going to limit it to all users. And let's see, let's do this. Right now I have an empty collection. It's a user-based collection. Add resources, search. Don't think I have any inventoried. Let's see. I have some users. Doesn't look like you can use this one to actually add them. Interesting. Only them. All right. Here is my normal account. This is my admin account. So now I've added in a user directly as a member to this one. And if I go membership rules, it shows up here. And I see the user just fine in this collection. It might be that if you add a group directly that you don't see the users, but you can definitely add them individually like I did here as a direct member if you want to do that. So I hope that answered that question a little bit at least. Yeah, and the follow-up comment there, I think the direct addition is limited to just users like I showed you here and not groups. Yeah, you might be very well spot on that one. Thank you. Let's see here. What other questions? We have a question here in the Zoom call from Terry regarding the hydration kit. I'm building out my hydration kit in Hyper-V Server 2019 on the Windows 11 PC. While running the CMO1 task sequence during the ConfigMgr installation, the system comes to a crawl, and Task Manager is showing Defender pegged around 80%. I have not seen Defender pegging it that bad, but you can definitely try to either exclude your VM's folder from Defender scanning, or at least temporarily disable the real-time engine. If it's something within the virtual machine, something that really upsets ConfigMgr installations is if the VM is configured to use dynamic memory. So to show you what I mean here, if I would create a new virtual machine that's supposed to be my lab CMO1 server, I store it in a folder somewhere, generation 2, a bit of memory, network is useful, Stockholm is good, hard drive, and I configure it to boot from an ISO file that makes up the hydration kit. I'll pick this one here and finish the setup. Go to that particular machine. This one here. Give it a bit of CPU. Don't do this. The ConfigMgr installation will take hours if the VM is configured to use dynamic memory. By all means, switch it over to use dynamic memory when you're done with installation. But during setup of basically anything Windows, do not have dynamic memory enabled. And this is enabled by default on Windows 10 and Windows 11 when you create a VM, but you can disable that through scripting, or you can go in afterwards and just say, I don't want it. So that might be why you're seeing a lot of installation time, a lot of CPU. Otherwise, I haven't seen anything like that. All right, there is a question coming in on YouTube. What is the best way to delete computers from AD, Azure AD, Intune, and ConfigMgr all at the same time? Well, unfortunately, in that particular case, you have to do things in certain order depending on your environment. For example, this and last week, I was working with a school on the other side of the earth from where I live, so down in Australia, and they wanted to implement routines to automatically clean up not just Autopilot devices, but Azure AD devices and also Intune managed devices. And all those things have to go in a certain order, otherwise it simply will not work. So for example, if you have a device that is enrolled through Autopilot and is available in Intune, on Azure AD, etc., you would first have to delete the Intune managed device, and then you would have to delete the Autopilot device. And like 5, 6, 7 minutes after that, you can go ahead and delete the Azure AD device. So it all comes down to scripting, basically, when you do these operations. If you need to do larger chunks of deletions or cleanup and whatnot, you have to script that. There is no like text box in Intune where you can add a computer name and say, hey, delete everywhere. You have to script that yourself. Luckily, there are plenty of examples to find out there on how to script this, but it is a little bit of a pain because you need to add in a lot of controls and checks, and you need to have wait in between deletions, different type of deletions. So yeah, that's a blog post for another day, definitely. All right, let's see. There's a question coming in on LinkedIn. Today we use Software Central as a front end, so that's a third-party tool that is often integrated with ConfigMgr. We have about 400 apps. I have tried to make them all available to the client through Software Center, but it's slow. It can take up to a minute before the application shows up in Software Center. Basically, do you have any idea on speed up that process? I mean, once the machine has received and evaluated the policies for those deployments, finding them in Software Center is usually not too bad. Sure, it's not the absolute fastest UI in terms of responsiveness, but it's been improved quite a bit over the years. So I haven't seen any of these longer delays, unfortunately. I'm not sure what you could do to speed up that process, unfortunately. In terms of moving them away from the third-party solution, you can do that through scripting. You can create the deployments the same way. Yeah, it's not something I have been involved in going that route. There's a question on YouTube. Dan is asking, do you have any advice on troubleshooting hardware inventory? The data loader frequently shows there is already an object, a name, and the name of the device in the database. There are several good blog posts out there on like step-by-step methods to troubleshoot hardware inventory. Garth Jones used to have one of the better ones in the days. Let me see if I can find that one. Just a second. He recently joined Recast Software, so some of his older blog posts have been moved over there. Let me see if I can find it. This one should do it. Give me 1 minute and I'll bring it over. This is, even though it's a few years old, hardware inventory haven't actually changed much the last decade even in ConfigMgr, but this is a good post to go through and terms on troubleshooting, what to expect in the log files, in which order to set things, etc. So I will put this link in the chat for those of you attending the Zoom call here. When I find the chat, I will put them in the chat. Here we go. And for those of you that are just watching the stream, all of these links that I share throughout these office hours, they are available on the Academy site. So basically, if you go here and you find the office hours, once you log into this site, it will actually show up nicely. I have a screenshot here. So this is where you see all the earlier recordings, but under every recording, there is also a link section on links that I have shared throughout these various office hours. So it was an easy way for us to just keep the links gathered in one place. So I don't have to post them in 4 different locations for every office hour. So this is where you find the links. on this site here. All right. Let's see what else we have. Question here in the Zoom call, what's the proper way to manage, allow and block Edge and Chrome browser extensions in an enterprise environment? I have not done that. I do not know. If anyone on the call happen to have done that, by all means, feel free to reach out or post a comment, and I'll be happy to relay that information. Try to think of that name. It was Rory that did a lot of stuff. Yeah, I don't have any links to any direct blog posts, but I presented with Rory back in Norway in years ago, but he used to have a lot of good information regarding like Chrome deployments and enterprise management related to this. So that might be a good start if his blog decides to load on this computer. But it's pretty fast on my other one. This one is up too. Let me go to one of my clients. They are on different networks to see if we have any better. Yeah, that looks better. So this would be a good source to find out information about that. I'll put that in the chat for you. He's actually doing a presentation somewhere tomorrow. So registration email at some point showing up. So Rory Monaghan would be a good start. All right. Another question was the proper way to reclaim licenses from users that haven't used software like Visual Project, Power BI, etc. Using ConfigMgr and Intune. Intune, I don't really know because Intune is kind of lacking on the software inventory side. Very, very, very basic software inventory, at least to compare to ConfigMgr. In ConfigMgr, you can kind of combine software metering and asset intelligence, at least as long as it's available there in the product. And you can run reports for like license reconciliation and map that into software metering and try to find usage for applications. So in ConfigMgr, you definitely have an option. Let me go to this one here. That was a sequence. It was a lot of Dell machines. So in assets and compliance, this is obviously where you can configure software metering and enable rules to monitor for different kind of software and the usage of that software. But they also have the asset intelligence where you can upload your own license list and you can kind of compare that to inventory data, at least through one of the default reports. So if I would go here, I have a little CSV file with some sample licenses. If I would take that and go into just open it with Excel, you can see that this is just a listing of different products and different versions and how many I happen to have been at least buying of each of these licenses. But you can very easily in ConfigMgr, you can import that license list. So you can select that you want a generic license file and you browse to where you have that license file. Um, and once you have that one imported, you can go to one of the Asset Intelligent reports. Um, like this one here, 15A, license reconciliation report. And you can run that report and it will then tell you uh, uh, how much licenses you have bought versus what ConfigMgr found in your environment. And I can see here I'm apparently extremely over licensed on 7-zip, which obviously is not the licensed software, but fair enough. It's just an idea that shows how this can play out. I remember our friends over at System Center Dudes, they used to have uh, query collections or query-based collections that will automatically figure out if software was underused and automatically uninstall it from those machines. That might be something you can look into. Um, but Config Manager is really good at this. I haven't seen a similar solution for Intune, unfortunately. So I hope I answered that question. Let's see. Is there any log to, so it's a question on LinkedIn. Are there any logs to troubleshoot a specific client setting? Um, Something I have been using to troubleshoot client settings is actually the support tool or support center tool that is now included in Config Manager. It used to be a separate download, but starting back in 1802 or something, or 1810 maybe, it's now included on the site server. So on a Config Manager installation, if you go into the install folder and go to Tools, Support Center, this is to find the Support Center installer. So of course you can access that one over the network, assuming that you have permissions. So CMO1, site code and tools, that will be the remote location. And then you simply run the installer, next, finish. And once you have that installer, you have access to that tool. It also comes with a viewer. You can copy a cab file from another system and view it in here, but you can also go to policies directly and say that I want to load the actual policy on this particular client, and then you can start to poke around. So if I want to make sure that my delivery optimization settings are the way they're supposed to be, this is a good way to see that. You can also do that through PowerShell because this is just the WMI class as a lot of other stuff that is in the config manager client. So if I would go to PowerShell, go to my script, let's see what I have here. Oh, yeah, this is one example. I wanted to view the restart settings. and I can simply ask that class right away, and it will tell me what kind of reboot notifications I have and restart settings I have on this computer coming down through a policy. So basically, each of these they have their own namespace here that you can query. If you don't know the namespace, you can find tools like WMI Explorer. It's a useful little tool that's been around for a long time. And wait a minute, I need to launch that as admin. Give me a second. Let's see what class I was in there. Root CCM policy. And I was looking at the actual config, and I was looking at the reboot settings here. So just different ways to see the same type of information. That can be helpful in troubleshooting as well. Yeah, so I hope that helps. Let's see. Question on YouTube. How much PowerShell knowledge is recommended to have in order to enroll in your courses for managing ConfigMgr and Intune through PowerShell? So that would be one of the academy courses here that this question is related to. It's presented by Ronnie with City Global. If I can search for PowerShell, here we go. So this one here that focuses on PowerShell for a good 6 weeks, it certainly helps if you have a basic understanding of PowerShell before joining the course, but it is not a requirement. One of the first modules that Ronnie goes through is a crash course in retrieving information from ConfigMgr and Intune using PowerShell. But definitely some basic information is helpful, but it's just not a requirement for the course. Also, these modules are recorded, so if there was something that went by a little bit too fast, you can always go back and review it over and over again until you nail it. And all the sample codes and scripts and whatnot are included as well. So, yeah. Any other questions? There's a question here in the Zoom call. What's the proper way to migrate Office 365 clients from semi-annual channel to a monthly channel with minimal administration efforts? And also, it's a good idea to have Office 365 clients pull down updates from Office CDN instead of WSUS SCCM. If you don't mind Office updates taking a little bit longer, it's perfectly all right to have them come down from CDN. I'm not sure why it's taking a little bit longer, but it usually does. So don't be surprised if Office updates can take up to an hour to get down at least. You can speed up things by configuring the live optimization settings, so the better performance. You can have local cache servers running Microsoft Connected Cache to speed up things. But other than that, it's kind of hard to beat that performance when you have a file server almost next to you that have the package that you need, that you simply download it to a client and run the installer. But in terms of simplicity, Office updates through Intune is actually quite easy. They are more complicated to work with in ConfigMgr. There are more knobs and things to turn around in the ConfigMgr environment. As far as changing the channel, I have not done that. I would guess applying a new configuration XML file that have that setting will be enough, but it's not something I have tested. I don't think you would have to go through a complete uninstall, reinstall. That would surprise me. But again, it's not something I have tested. If anyone happen to know how to switch from a different update model, feel free to post in the uh, various channels here. But that's all the information I have right now. Question coming in regarding Intune. What is your opinion if the company wants to move to Intune? Is it a good idea to sync all machines, about 6,000, or just some? I'm assuming this is related to having an existing ConfigMgr environment and want to move that or some workloads over to Intune. I would definitely not recommend just flipping the switch and move everyone at once. I would do that a little bit gradually until I have learned how the new workloads affect and work in my environment. And then once I'm comfortable with that, add more and more workloads and eventually more and more clients over. It's so easy in that type of setup to leverage collections to select what workload you're moving over. So if I would go to the co-management setup here, or cloud attached setup, and take a look into the various workloads when they decide to open. Have some coffee in the meantime. So in these workloads, when they're set to pilot, and this is where you use your different collections for the different type of workloads. And you can use include exclude collection because you can only select one here. So in my environment, it's only the pilot machines or the machines that happen to be in this specific collection that are being co-managed at this point in time. And of course, you can easily add in more and more collections into this one when you want. So I hope that answered that question. That was funny. David Segura on YouTube commented and said, I had zero PowerShell experience when I took Johan's Geek Week course back in the day. To give some perspective, that was about 10 years ago. And now David is one of the outmost experts on PowerShell on this blue planet of ours. So I think the student became the master on that one for sure. David had written tens of thousands of PowerShell lines just the last 2 years. So thank you there, David. I absolutely love everything you do for the community in terms of PowerShell. Good stuff. All right. Let's see. A question on LinkedIn. Is there a way to build machines, not Autopilot, through the classic internet-based client management and not CMG? No, really no. Microsoft never added in full OS deployment support to the classic internet-based client management. And these days, I would actively, I also plan on learning English. That's on my to-do list. I don't really recommend anyone to use that method anymore. If you have machines on internet that you need to manage, I recommend to pay a few $100 every month and use Cloud Management Gateway to do that, because it's really not that expensive, even if you have a large estate of machines that you manage. Most environments, they only pay, as I mentioned, a few $100. And if you want some real world numbers, I actually asked around about a year ago, 2 years ago maybe, to some of our customers of different sizes that I worked with. And I asked them nicely for, can you just please provide me with real numbers from your own cloud management gateway implementations. And this was even before the scale sets that are now available, where you can actually select some different sizes of VMs to control the cost a little bit. But if you look down here, even organizations with a large chunk of devices, the average cost per month per PC is usually in the a few cents range. And that allows you to manage the machines almost as they were on premises, but no matter where they are in the world. And it does support starting with 2103 of ConfigMgr bare metal deployment, and starting with 21, no, not 2103, starting with 2010. So that's a year and a half ago. You don't even need access to the on-premise resources anymore. The only thing you need to do is create your boot image, specify your management point, your CMG management point when you create that boot image, and you can now image machines wherever they are. If you don't want to use Cloud Management Gateway for imaging, there are other solutions out there. David, who commented earlier on this, I'll put that link in the chat before I forget it. Give me just a moment. David, who commented on YouTube earlier, he has been running his Cloud OSD for a good while now. And this is obviously a solution that can deploy machines without ConfigMgr at all, completely over internet, no infrastructure requirements whatsoever. So that's a good one. I'll put that in the chat for you guys. We also have a project that me and some other friends have been working on for a good few years, and that's the PowerShell extension to MDT. It was a project that was started by Mike and Niehaus back in the days, and then he tricked us into continue to develop it, but it's available here, and it's just an extension that gives you cloud imaging capabilities on a normal MDT deployment servers. So these are about the only solutions that I know of that outside of the CMG works well with cloud imaging, and we have fairly large customers using these in production today. They simply didn't have ConfigMgr, or they didn't want to have ConfigMgr, but they still need to be able to deploy machines everywhere. So that's some good resources. And thank you for the kind words, David. Appreciate it. All right, let's see. I have a few calls coming in on the Zoom call here. A follow-up comment to the getting updates from CDN. What can we do in order to basically speed that up enterprise environment to make that better? Depending on your setup, for example, if you have VPN links into your Office, you need to make sure that they are configured correctly, split tunneling and whatnot, so that they don't collect through your VPN traders when trying to grab resources that are basically out here on maybe a local internet breakout. At 2Point, we did put together a little blog post just recently on some recommendations from for DO settings for Intune. And Office updates are using this technology when you don't manage them through ConfigMgr. And by simply doing some changes in your settings, you can usually speed up deployment quite a bit of these updates, because peer-to-peer is really good in increasing the speed on which updates are being downloaded to the client. So if you haven't seen these recommendations, that would be a good one. So I mentioned earlier, you can also enable cache servers. If you have an Intune license, you typically have a ConfigMgr license, and that means that you can spin up a virtual machine running ConfigMgr with only the purpose of being a cache server. Don't use it for anything else, it's just a cache server. And that allows you to speed up Autopilot app deployment, Office updates, and basically anything when you have a lot of the state of machines that needs to download stuff quickly. And you don't want them to download over internet, but you want to have something locally that acts as a caching mechanism for them. Most environments, they don't need cache servers because they often have pretty good internet. And usually what you will find is that if you set up delivery optimization using these recommended settings, that is often good enough. We do have a community event scheduled for May 12, I believe. Yeah, May 12. So it's me, Andreas, and Phil are doing a repeat session on a 2-hour webinar on basically every peer-to-peer technology that Microsoft offers, how they work, and what you can do to improve it. Some bit of troubleshooting as well. The price for this one is pretty much right. It's open for the community. It's for the community, and would love to see you there. So, whoops. That link in the chat as well. Let's see. That is asking, can you recommend any script to target machines that did not reboot over a certain amount of days and enforce to reboot? I know that one of our customers is using that to force a reboot every week of machines. Don't think I have anything on my blog or in my GitHub repository. Comes to mind. I mean, obviously you can see it in the ConfigMgr console because machines will show up these days if there is a pending reboot and for what reason there is a pending reboot. There are a few. Let's see if I can bring one of them over. One might do it. This is from SVAR, I believe. Yeah, SVAR Conetti. Getting a report with a collection of different states. It's basically an advanced or somewhat advanced query. It might be possible to find and match that together with uptimes, assuming that information is available. Last reboot I can see here showing up as a column. Maybe something like this. I'll put that link in the chat for you. If anyone happen to have a good solution of automatically tracking that, feel free to post that link in the chat. Otherwise, I don't think it will be too hard to generate if you start to look into the data, because in your various collections, you have uptime, Um, where the there was a restart also. That one was changed. Daytime, not uptime. Be within the collection. Pending restart. Show you, and a combination of some of this can give you some ideas. Yeah, anyhow. Another question here in the Zoom call. Could you please provide us with some input on how to troubleshoot blue screen BSOD issues or blue screen of death issues? We are seeing a lot of BSODs lately on Lenovo desktops. Well, first of all, most blue screen issues are indeed related to drivers. And just open up a debugger. Loading in that memory dump is usually a good starting point. There are plenty of blog posts out there on how to analyze blue screen using WinDebug. I wonder if I have any crashes here that I've saved. I did not. Oh, maybe this one. What that one is. Huh. A Razer mouse driver, or yeah, one of their processes. But this was basically a machine that crashed, and it was configured to automatically save a memory dump. And I just open up that memory dump in WinDBG or WinDebug, free download from Microsoft. Open the dump file, run analyze, and it will usually tell you what driver that is causing the trouble. And you can try to uninstall that driver, go to a new version or sometimes older version of that driver, or reach out to the vendor and say, hey, this particular module, this driver causes problems in our environment. Something that I found reasonably useful to keep an eye on things is that starting back in Windows Vista, and it's still available, if you go to reliability history, you will see how a machine has been, what happened to it over time, including crashes, app crashes, error issues, driver issues, and whatnot. And this information is retrievable through PowerShell. So we had a customer in Germany a few years back that used this information. They had about 10,000 clients. They would just inventory this data and run reports out of it to figure out which of their models were causing the most blue screens. So they found out that 2 of their models were responsible for like 80% of all the blue screens. And when you find information like that, metrics like that, it's easy to justify and say, all right, let's get together a few of us and actually look into this problem, because if we can fix it, we will reduce 80% of the blue screens in our company. So this is a good resource to find information about what machines are having the problem. It might be machines that you don't even know about because users didn't tell you. But WinDebug is a good tool to analyze them. And basically, if you do a quick Google search on analyze blue screens with WinDbg. There are a ton of different resources available. Videos, guides, and whatnot. So I'll put this official link in the chat. And a nice weekend project. Another question here in the Zoom call, what's the proper way to update store apps if you have Microsoft Store blocked in your environment? I mean, obviously you can download offline versions of store apps and constantly push them out with whatever mechanism you're using to do that, Intune, ConfigMgr, MDT, whatnot. It's often easier to block store on the user level instead, and not on the machine level. And in my experience so far, it allows the machine to still get updates for them without allowing the user to actually go into the store and do stuff. In enterprise and education, there used to be a policy also where you can force them into allowing the business store that is now obviously going away and being replaced with another store versus the normal store for applications. So that will be the two options available there. Right, let's see what else. Friendly Soul on LinkedIn just posted a query for the question regarding reboots, I believe. Thank you very much for that, Jamal. Appreciate the help. Excellent. Any other question? I will put that in the chat as well here. Query for pending reboot. That was the query that came in. This is what the query looked like. Memorize. But this one I will add to the link collection as well, so you can copy and paste from there for those of you that didn't see it on the LinkedIn chat for this live stream. Thank you very much again. All right, any other questions? Matt is asking how to delete machines that have been active in more than 60 days. Depends on where that machine is. If we are talking Intune, there are ready-made options there to automatically delete the devices that haven't been contacted Intune in 90 days or whatever. If you're talking Azure AD, for whatever reason, that option is not available there, but I saw someone that made a runbook that we showcased maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago in office hours. But that's just a PowerShell script basically, or scripting technology to stale devices, Azure AD runbook. Yeah, this one here. So that would be an option to have that going, and of course other scripting methods that you have available. But I thought this one was quite nice. I'll put that link in the chat. Azure cleanup. Excellent. Follow-up question to figure out if store has been blocked on the user level or on the machine level. Since those are group policy settings, you can simply do it like a GP result on the machine to see what policies have applied. And if you do a GP result dash verbose or v for verbose, you will actually see each individual setting and what policy that came from. So that shouldn't be too hard to figure out. Any more questions? We have a whopping 3 minutes to spare here. Well, while we waiting for more questions to come in, for those of you that follow our newsletter, you have learned that every month we send out information regarding things that we talk about here on the Academy, but also updates in general from MDT, ConfigMgr, Intune, and whatnot. So if you're not subscribing, by all means, please do that. I'm also stupidly excited to announce that we are bringing our masterclasses home to the Academy. For those of you who may not know, I've been doing classes with Kent Oglen for years and years and years, and we just made an agreement with CD Global on offering these courses here on the Academy. So starting mid-April, we will have the first masterclass available here on the Academy. So that is very, very excited for that. But other than that, all the usual stuff you find where you used to find it. All right, I don't see any more questions either in the queue or in the various live streams. So thank you everyone for joining today. It's been a pleasure helping you answer these questions, and I hope to see you again next week. And next week we are running it at 9 in the morning. One of the few slots we have in April for that. But until then, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday.